Hello, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today, whether you're on Facebook or on Zoom. My name is Veronica Domingo, and I'm the Assistant Director of Programs here at Omega. Today is my first day back on campus in such a long time, and it's so good to be back here. Today, we are honored to have Dr. Andrea Pennington with us, who you may recognize from her TED Talks, her many appearances on TV, or her very popular YouTube channel called Pennington Media. Dr. Pennington is a best-selling author, an integrative physician, an acupuncturist, and an educator, and she's joining us all the way from her home in France. She's an expert on our subject today, which is about rebounding from burnout and building resilience. And she will also be teaching about building personal resilience on campus this year for the first time during our opening weekend, which will be July 23rd through the 25th. And Dr. Pennington, please help us today. Tell us what you can share about rebounding from burnout, as I'm sure all of you can relate, no matter where you are in the world. Anyway, I'm just so happy to have you here, and I'm going to hand it over to you.
Well, I am so grateful. Thank you so much, Veronica, for welcoming me into the Omega world. I'm super excited about the retreat this summer, and really grateful to have this opportunity to share with people around the world some of the insights that have come up for me in my research around burnout and resilience. So, yeah, we're looking at the events of 2020, particularly the pandemic. We'll talk about other events as well, but we're talking about this pandemic as being the great equalizer. So no matter your socioeconomic class, no matter your age, no matter your wealth status, everyone has been impacted by it. And my particular background is in the work of resilience, both on a research angle as well as treating patients for the last 20 years. And one of the key things that I want us all to know right off the bat is you were born resilient. You have an innate vitality code. That means in your DNA, in your very makeup, you have the ability to rebound. That is, to bounce back after an illness, injury, any sort of setback or trauma. So even though you may feel a little wobbly right now or unstable, or maybe you're completely triggered, as so many of us are, with anxiety and perhaps some chronic PTSD, I want you to just, before we start talking about all the great techniques for building resilience, just know that they are within you. You have this natural capacity. And we're just going to talk about ways that you can return to a state of vitality. Now, the reason that I am particularly interested in burnout is because I have burnt out before. And burnout, for those of you who are not super familiar or haven't experienced it yourself, it's a condition that we doctors, term when you have physical exhaustion, emotional exhaustion, and what we call either decreased efficacy, meaning you're just not getting as much out of your professional work as possible. And it's not the same as just being tired. It's not the same as just being overworked. And it's important to me because as a physician, what I noticed is it happens to people in different flavors. And there is no one-size-fits-all treatment for it either. I don't know if you guys are aware of that, but if you went to your family doctor, for example, and you showed some of the signs of burnout, they might actually diagnose it as depression. If you're on the low, slow side, they might diagnose you with anxiety if you're super anxious. They might even think that you just have ADHD because you're kind of flitting from one thing to another, or maybe you have insomnia. The challenge is that for most people, they won't be actually diagnosed with burnout. They'll be diagnosed with something else, which leads them down, a treatment path. And one of the things that I'm advocating for is a global recognition of how burnout is treated. And that's a bit of my expertise coming from the world of addiction medicine. So when I started my career over 20 years ago, I was introduced to acupuncture and traditional Chinese medicine, and in a particular setting. It was working with people who were addicted to alcohol and other drugs. And so working in the drug detox world, we're talking about serious physiologic burnout. And when you have multiple organ systems that just go offline, your hormones are out of whack, your cardiovascular system is tweaked, your immune system is either really depressed, leading you to often get sick, or it's hyperfunctioning, leading you to have some autoimmune condition. And so I'm bringing all this up to say that when we treat people with addiction and alcohol detox, they're typically hospitalized, or they're in some sort of a rehab center where we can monitor everything that's going on, meaning your physiology as well as your psychology. But here we are in the midst of a pandemic, and we have millions of people who are undiagnosed and they're in burnout. They're stressed beyond measure. And what do you do? Well, some people will go to their HR department and they'll say, look, we can't give you more of a break, or maybe you just need a few days off. Or people will say, oh, I'm just waiting for that vacation. If I can get those 2 weeks, I'm sure I'll recover. And having interviewed people and shooting a documentary about resilience, we've all been there. Many people who've burnt out have said those very words, thinking that if only I could just take the weekend or a couple of weeks off, I'm going to get better. But the reality is, burnout affects multiple organ systems, and just resting is not enough. You need a holistic approach. So I'm going to talk a little bit about rebounding from burnout. But first, I want to tease back up this idea of resilience, because I said that you were born with this capacity to rebound. And so why do some people burn out and not others? Because it's not just a matter of number of hours per work week. So some people can work 40, 50, 60 hours and never burn out, and other people do burn out. So the difference is actually within us. Some of us will be more susceptible to burnout than other people. And the resilience factors play into that. Because what I mean by some of us will be more susceptible, what I mean is there are certain personality traits. So we're not even going to talk about your DNA yet, but there are certain personality traits. If you happen to be a type A perfectionist, like I was, kind of overworking, always kind of looking for approval, overdoing things, tweaking to perfection, maybe even seeking validation outside of yourself, well, that's one of the traits that's not only associated with burnout, but it's associated with relapse, because burnout happens to be a relapsing condition. And that's why just taking a weekend or a couple weeks off often doesn't work. So the statistics show that over 50% of people who burn out once will burn out again. And that's why I'm so grateful to have this conversation with you, just to tease up some of the things that you can actually do for yourself to either prevent burnout or to bounce back. And God willing, you could even bounce forward. And that is really the opportunity that we're seeing with this pandemic, as well as all of the social and political unrest that's going on around the world. Many of us are waking up to a new sense of reality. We're waking up to the reality that we can't trust the government necessarily, or the pharmaceutical companies, or the food manufacturers and the financial world. The responsibility is on us to really take back our lives. And that's offering a lot of people hope, believe it or not. As much as I went online doing live meditations in 2020, helping people deal with the stress and the panic, I've heard so many people say that they burned out, working too much, Zoom fatigue, trying to be there for everyone, but they considered it a blessing. Because what this pandemic has done, and all of the other sheltering in place, it's given us an opportunity to really look at our lifestyle. How have we been living? How was our work-life integration? Forget about balance. How have we been parenting? How have we been in our relationships? And what has our relationship been to ourselves? For many people, burnout and breakdowns are golden opportunities to shift everything. So with that in mind, there are a few key things about resilience that if you have these in mind, it will help you. I recently published this book here, The Top 10 Traits of Highly Resilient People. So I thought I would take you through what these 10 traits are so that you can pinpoint which ones you might be a little bit weak on and which ones you can actually celebrate or continue to strengthen. And then in a couple weeks' time, I'll actually have a quiz where you can log in and find out your resilience score, find out how you rate on each of them. And I give you a free report for you to assess. So I'm going to share my screen with you. It'll just be on these 10 traits. So the first trait of highly resilient people, and this is again based on my research and professional work, the first trait is insight, self-awareness. And what this really means is emotional intelligence. Are you aware of what stresses you out? Are you aware of the triggers? Are you aware of what you need to have in place for your vitality? Now that may sound very basic, but without it, you're always going to be reacting to the outside world. So insight and self-awareness will give us the ability to really tune into our bodies, to give our bodies what they need, to give our mind what we need, which is usually deep, deep rest. The second trait of highly resilient people is flexibility and adaptability. So if any of you have ever been a control freak, I am a former perfectionist control freak in recovery, then you know how it is when you were just rigidly attached to one way. It's my way or the highway, got to get things done. Well, what happens when you end up with all the uncertainty that we are facing right now? You risk breaking down. When you're trying so hard to control, you're grasping and clinging to your way. But highly resilient people are able to be flexible and adaptable. They let go of the sense of control. And that is actually a resilience trait because then you are better able to respond based on what the real circumstances are. The third trait is persistence. Now this is a tricky one because right now a lot of people are calling themselves resilient when what they've done is shouldered the burden of too many stressors in their life and they're becoming hardened and on the way to burnout. So yes, by being persistent and continuing to go for your goals and finding new ways to get things done and encouraging yourself, that can be a sign of resilience, but we also have to be mindful that everything exists on a spectrum. The fourth trait is compassion. And today I'm going to lead us into a guided meditation practice of self-compassion because it's a huge one that will help us develop insight and awareness, and it can actually broaden and expand our tolerance level for what's going on around us, in our relationships, and in the world. The fifth trait is optimism. This is a tricky one because a lot of people right now are feeling not so much hope, having lost jobs and lost loved ones and their livelihood. But if we can find even a little glimmer of hope for the future, this is a resilience trait that we can continue to build upon. And I'll be specifically working on that in our workshop at the Omega Institute in July. Confidence and self-efficacy, these are also traits of highly resilient people. And so this is all about you looking at your strengths. I know that this has been a time of reflection for many of us, and we've been looking at all the things wrong in our life and our lifestyle, but we've also got to look at what we do right and start to organize our life around our strengths so that we can have that confidence. And even if things are not going well here, we can look to the past to help us with our confidence as well. Positive self-talk is trait number 7. I go into this in all of my books and all of my trainings because as a former perfectionist, I used to have this really negative dialogue in my head. I don't know if anyone else out there has an inner critic that screams at you. Well, I had several of them. But what I found out in the research is that the most resilient and stress-resistant people have a positive inner dialogue going on, not this negative tirade of judgment and criticism. The 8th trait is a connection to positive people. So having positive relationships is one of the ways that we can build resilience. Having someone that we can lean on and talk to when times are tough is really a key one. And I think that the pandemic has really helped people identify who their strong, positive friendships are and start weeding out the ones that are more draining. Positive emotions are things like awe, wonder, joy, and these are things that we can cultivate ourselves. And so I generally start with gratitude on a daily basis. If we tune into the things that we can appreciate or find things that are funny to laugh at, the good work of Barbara Fredrickson has shown that every micro moment of positive emotion is depositing a little bit of positivity into our psychological wellness bank. And so if you want to become more resilient, focusing on positive emotions will help you. And our 10th and last of the top traits of highly resilient people is having purpose in life or meaning in life. It's what the Japanese called ikigai. It's waking up and feeling like you have some sort of contribution to make, if not to the world, at least in your immediate surroundings. The most resilient people, the people who bounce back after surgery and illness and accidents, are people who report that they have a high sense of purpose and meaning in life. So those are the 10 traits. And I just wanted to give you sort of a framework for what they are. And if you care to, you can type into the chat the ones that you're a little bit weak in and celebrate the ones that you're strong in. And Veronica, is now a good time for me to lead our guided practice? And then we'll have time for questions. Perfect? Okay. So as long as you're not driving or chopping vegetables or taking care of anyone, I would just invite you to get real comfortable wherever you are. Maybe close your eyes if you're able to, safely. And take a few deep belly breaths. I want you to imagine that you can really fill your lungs all the way to these top lobes of the lungs. Because so oftentimes when we're stressed, we don't breathe deeply and we end up trapping CO2 up here. So taking a deep breath in, I give myself permission to relax. And as I exhale, I release tension. Taking another deep breath in. We breathe in relaxation. And taking an out breath, we let go of tension in the body. Now we'll just do a quick body scan. With your next breath, just imagine that you could breathe in light, either through the top of your head or through your nose. And breathing in this light, it fills your head, kind of illuminating if there's any tightness or tension. Allow that light to go down your neck, down your shoulders. And with it, this light carries relaxing energy. So we take another deep breath. The light goes into our chest, filling our lungs. The heart pumps this oxygen-rich light down the arms to the elbows, the hands, down your abdomen, down your back, to the seat of your pants. And if this light comes across any tension or pain or tightness, just allow that light to linger there a little bit and see if you can release and let go of any tension. With our next breath, we direct this light down our legs, our thighs, to our knees, to our shins and our calves, down to your ankle, the sole of your feet, the top of your feet, and your toes. And one more deep breath in of this healing, relaxing light. And breathing out, just releasing any of the tension of the day in our body or mind. And so in these few moments that we have together for this practice, I want you to allow yourself to just become aware of what you feel. From the basics of how your body feels, sitting where you are, the temperature of the room. Is there anything going on in your body? Any tightness? And without judging it, just become aware, open, and maybe even curious. If you have been feeling any of these symptoms of burnout, there's probably a physical component or two. And very often we judge ourselves harshly for not being able to go on, or we judge our body for breaking down. But in this moment, we're just going to tune into the body with open awareness. And if you have identified a part of the body that is tight or aching or giving you some problems, just ask that part of your body if it has any message for you. The human body is a mirror of the subconscious mind. And so very often when we're overworked and stressed, we don't really feel our feelings, and we don't listen to the body. And so in this moment, we're giving ourselves permission to let things be just as they are without judgment, and inviting the body to share its wisdom with us. And at this time, we don't even go into judgment for ourselves. It's very easy to adopt a victim mentality when there's so many things out of our control. But in this moment, I'm going to invite you to imagine that there is a being with us in this very safe space, some compassion figure. It could be someone you know, a relative, grandparent who may be passed on. It could be some holy being, an angel, a saint. It could be Christ, the Buddha, Muhammad, Solomon. Just imagine that there is this figure that loves you unconditionally. And here in this state, no matter what state you're in, whether you're feeling broken and burnt out, or you're stressed and anxious, just imagine that this compassion figure is sending from its heart to you these rays of light. See if you can just allow that light to reach you. And along with this light are these positive intentions. So imagine that this compassion figure is saying to you, may you be truly happy. Even in the midst of our sorrows and suffering, may you be free from suffering. Even with all of these hardships and difficulties, may you be well in body, mind, and heart. And even with all of these losses, may you live peacefully and with ease. So if you can, just imagine that these waves of loving kindness are kind of sprinkling and sparkling on you. Can you breathe that into your heart and receive it? Receiving this unconditional love and acceptance. Just like radio waves and TV waves There are always waves of love and compassion. And as a human antenna, you can choose to tune into that. So, if you can imagine receiving this from this compassion figure, or dialing yourself as if you are a human antenna, can you direct some of that loving kindness to whatever part of your body or mind that has felt most stressed, that is in need of the most rejuvenation? And it could be the you of today, or it could be the you that was wounded in the past, and that's why you're triggered or anxious. So if you're already familiar with your inner child or a younger version of yourself, you might invite that part of you into this safe space. And if you can, imagine from your own heart to the body part of you that might be aching or needing attention, or to that younger inner child. From your heart, direct light and love as you say out loud or in your mind, "It is my sincere wish that I be free from suffering." And of course, if you're saying it to your inner child, you can say, may you be free from suffering. It is my sincere wish that you be truly happy. May you be well in body, mind, and heart. And may you live peacefully and with ease. So as we have this beautiful light and love kind of swirling around us between the hearts of our compassion figure, our adult self, and any body part or inner child that needs it, just imagine soaking that in and knowing that it's always here for you. What we recognize by reciting this loving kindness metta meditation is that we're human, and we all share these characteristics of falling down, getting hurt, aging, losing. We're all connected by this humanity. And all of us, including ourselves, we deserve a little grace and compassion. And when we can have that for ourselves, we have a better chance of recovering. And when we have that compassion for ourselves, we're better able to share our resources with others. So now, with everyone that's participating in this Zoom call, for the folks watching on Facebook and YouTube and on the replay, just imagine that from your heart, you could send out these same wishes to everyone participating here. And so imagine sending from your heart these waves of loving kindness as you recite these 4 phrases. May you know true happiness. And as you're giving, remember to receive. May you be free from suffering. May you be well in body, mind, and heart. And may you live peacefully and with ease. So I invite you to just remember that you have the power to tune into positive emotion. We start off typically with gratitude. So I want to thank our friends at the Omega Institute, all of our tech folks for getting us here assembled. Is there something in your world or your environment that you can express thanks and gratitude for? We'll just end this practice with one little thought of something that you're grateful for. And now, for those who are willing, we will say goodbye to our compassion figure, goodbye to our inner child, and thank them for coming out, being willing to participate. And now, from this special conversation and from our hearts, let us send love and light to all beings on this planet. So if you would, imagine sending light and love around the earth as we say, may all beings know true happiness. May all beings be free from suffering. May all beings be truly well. And may all beings live peacefully and with ease. So just take another deep breath as we end this little compassion meditation. And we're going to come back into our Zoom space. Thank you for allowing me to share some loving kindness, some metta with you around the world. So you might want to stretch, have a look around, orient yourself back here in this present moment. This is a little taster of the Attunement Meditation process, which is a 5-step mindfulness meditation process that helps to calm the body and mind and tune into compassion as we are doing our holistic healing. And I'll share more of that at Omega, but you can also download a guided version online. So thank you all for being here, and we have time for questions or reactions to this experience.
We have a Bobby Celeste with her hand up here in the Zoom.
Thank you. That was beautiful.
Thank you.
A question I have is, I'm a psychologist and I have some friends who have chronic pain issues. And I wonder about what it's like to tell them to tune into their body when I know parts of their body. By doing that, they may focus on the pain. What do you recommend?
Thank you for the question, Bobby. In that instance, the question really is, how do they relate to the pain? So as I was talking through this meditation process, a lot of people go into judgment, either judgment of themselves, like victim mentality, poor me, or they're mad at their bodies. Mm-hmm. And quite often when we do these mindfulness meditation practices, if you're willing to sit with the uncomfortableness, including shining that light on the parts of the body that we're either angry at or feeling sorry about, by doing that and being willing to say or to hear what the body wants to hear, I would invite anyone who's participating today to journal. Later today or immediately after this call, just write down what came up for you. Because oftentimes the body will tell us what we need. And we also become the witness. In my work with eating disorders, I noticed that a lot of people would identify with their bodies. And so if their body wasn't behaving the way they wanted, they felt their identity was, at risk of peril. And that led them into even more control behaviors. But when we start to do mindfulness practice and we're willing to sit with the uncomfortable feelings, there comes a moment when we become the witness and we recognize this body is not me. I'm not my body. I'm not my symptoms. I'm not this disease process. I'm not a number on the scale. And with cultivating this willingness to listen to the body, we become better tuned into the fact that we are indeed the witness. So Bobby, if you'd like, you can share the attunement meditation, because I walk people through how to deal with either emotions that come up or physical sensations that come up that people usually don't want to address. They'd rather numb out or not think about them. But I find that for the more years that I'm on the planet, there's so much wisdom held in the body. And there's one other thing I haven't talked about, but I've been sharing a lot on my live streams, and that is about childhood trauma, developmental trauma, and adverse childhood experiences. And especially as you bring up this idea of chronic pain, sometimes it's true, it's an illness or an accident that led to the pain in the first place. But each of us has a different susceptibility point. For some people, it might be their tissues or their bones. For others, it might be the gut. For yet others, it might be the mind or the skin. Each of us has our own energy imprint. And depending on when and where we may have been wounded in childhood, you may find that the symptoms that you're having as an adult are linked to those adverse childhood experiences. And so the holistic healing and resilience building that I talk about always goes back to looking at those formative years, not just for physical or emotional abuse, but also for the mental wounding, because we take on victim mentality, for example. Mm-hmm. Does that help at all, Bobby?
Yes, thanks. And I will definitely check it out. The attunement meditation practice. Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
I saw Melanie first. Scott, do you see Melanie there? There she is.
Hi, Melanie Rose.
Hi. Thank you so much. And everyone that's here as well. I'm so happy to be here. So I love the word compassion in your meditation as well as your talk, Doctor. And my own therapist, I am a therapist, but my own therapist has told me most recently I really need to yet again be bringing up compassion for myself. So I think my question is, I do have some pretty good trauma history in my first and last marriage. And I have been out of the marriage for over 30 years, but the same things, keep coming up. And I certainly get triggered by things. It was quite abusive and violent at times. And so, I kind of practice what I preach. And so sometimes I'm aware when I'm being triggered and things are happening. However, I'm just ever amazed and curious, but also ever frustrated that I don't seem to get over things in a much better way. I have periods where I remember the trauma, and I have 2 children, so I've had some issues and struggles with the parenting, but things overall, and try to keep showing up at events where I do my best, and I do. But I get into this good old victim of remembering the past and going through yet again this period of time when I was with my ex before the children, then after this period of time. And then I feel like, oh, good, I've reached another level, another plateau. Well, I think I'm coming out of it. Just had my therapy this morning. And I think about 2 weeks ago, I'm like, but I have been 2 months and I've been doing good through the pandemic, but I had a while. So I guess it's just the trauma that there's a part of my heart that says, well, you just need to keep going through these periods. They're helpful at some level. And so I do get through them, but I've been 2 months. Talk about burnout, but also out of my head I'm working, I'm sleeping, but every day I'm replaying all this past stuff, and I'm furious, I'm humiliated, and I'm moving out of it. So doctor, just some words about going through the same kind of events, but then feeling like when you say, be glad they might move you forward, because sometimes I do think, but this last one, I was ready to leave the planet and say goodbye to my entire family. And thankfully I didn't. But it almost felt like one of the worst ones. So any words you can share with me, I would love.
Well, thank you first and foremost for sharing, Melanie. I appreciate your vulnerability. And I know what that's like. So the thing about trauma and getting re-triggered, what I've noticed is sometimes talk therapy isn't enough. Because as you pointed out, things keep coming up because for most of us, the brain is such a brilliant organ. It has recorded every experience, and especially the ones charged with emotion, like abuse, so that it can be on the lookout for the next bit of abuse. And so we get triggered. It might not even be the same person. It could be a smell. It could be the look on a person's face. And it's not a conscious reaction, but something within us gets triggered. And what I can say about trauma healing and trauma recovery, in my experience, is it requires a holistic approach. So talk therapy is wonderful, but the intellectual part of us is not going to address the physical symptoms or the triggers and reactions. Like cognitive behavioral therapy, that helps in some, but what also is really helpful is to get into some body-oriented therapies. So whether that's somatic experiencing or any of the other movement modalities, dance, psychodrama, bringing in the kinesthetic and the physical can also help. One of the things that you're probably already doing, but one of the things that we do to help people better process and decouple that stress response is either meridian tapping or EMDR before or during a session, and journal work afterward. Now, there's something different between when we're talking, we're using a different part of the brain than when we're writing. And with writing, there are two ways to do it. You can write about these experiences, and I'm borrowing from the work of James Pennebaker. I teach a life writing process for trauma recovery, and it involves writing about events for 4 days straight, and on the 5th day, you write the lessons that you learned. And it may seem like, well, I've talked about these things ad nauseum, why would that help? Well, there's something different that happens when we write.
Right.
There's an additional unburdening and additional insights.
Yes.
And then there's another piece of the writing, and that is for the inner child. Now, depending on when we were wounded, you might have an inner child, an inner infant, or an inner teenager that was wounded or abused, and they are still carrying the beliefs and the emotional reactions. And so oftentimes through the narrative therapy or life writing and guided meditations, like today we went very gentle, but sometimes when we do parts integration and parts therapy with guided meditation, you can also get some unburdening of the subconscious mind. But if you're finding yourself continually triggered, I would look into EMDR, unless your therapist is already using that with you. For some people, EMDR is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. And by moving our eyes side to side, or there are little things you can hold in your hand that kind of buzz in an alternate fashion. Also, just going for walks can do this as you're sort of processing. It helps the brain uncouple the toxicity of the memory and the body's response to it. So I find that very helpful for people who keep finding themselves getting triggered and re-triggered and re-triggered. EMDR incorporated into your talk therapy can be helpful as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you again.
Thank you. Yeah, and just a quick note, when you say the holistic part, I am aware when you say dance is definitely my big therapy for decades. But with the pandemic, my dance community. And I just thought this morning that through all the years of some trauma, one of my greatest support networks has been the work community, because it has been very supportive. So I need to recreate some kind of an actual community now, which was part of helping me through, right? Yeah, so thank you so much for your help.
You're welcome. Yes, you need to have a few dance parties on Zoom. Get the music playing, get your body moving. Yeah. And I saw a question from Jan about the difference between burnout and compassion fatigue, and then we can get to Robert. So, and thank you for typing in, Omega, that yes, in 2019, the WHO recognized burnout as a true medical condition. The only problem I have with that is that they label it a workplace phenomenon. So if you went to your primary care doctor, they would not diagnose you with burnout if you happen to be a caregiver, for example. So caregivers, helpers of all kinds, are the ones who are affected the most by burnout. So anyone who's in a helping profession or a caregiving role. Now, compassion fatigue is often a precursor to burnout. So with our big compassionate hearts, those of us that are in the helping or healing professions, we tend to overdo. We want to give and support and be there for everyone. And our hearts literally ache as we see other people suffering. But when you are out of balance, if you haven't refilled your own cup by doing that meditative practice we just did, or walking or dancing or other ways that you fill back up, you can get to this sense of compassion fatigue, which is part of burnout. And people in burnout will find that they have cynicism. They don't feel the same level of compassion that they did before. They get this sort of emotional distancing from their work or for the people they are caring for. But compassion fatigue is just when you've worn out your compassion muscle and you need to take a break for yourself. So I see Robert has his hand up. I don't know if there are others.
Yes, good evening. I'm coming in from London, so lovely to hear you. And I really like your top 10 list. It did make me think, if you were focusing that list and you had to give us your top 3 traits, what would they be?
I'm asked that so often. Actually, they are the top 3 that are on the list. They literally are. So number 1 is insight. You know, when I was doing my medical training and doing a psychology rotation, one of the attending physicians explained to me, you know, this person over there thinks they're hearing voices. They have this whole conspiracy thing that they believe is real. The difference is some of us might think we have a bug, or maybe there's a microchip in the vaccine, but we at least have the insight to say, maybe this is not real. If you lack insight, everything else falls apart. So if I had to focus on the top 3, number 1 is insight and self-awareness, knowing your triggers, knowing your resources and how you resource. I often tell the story of how I was introduced to resilience work. It was when I was at burnout. I was working for Discovery Channel. I was on TV and had this wellness center, and I was working at least 80 hours a week. That was before having a child. And I remember talking to this therapist, and he said, you know, you need to become FAT, F-A-T, flexible, adaptable, and tolerant. And that second trait of resilience, at least in my research and in my book, is flexibility and adaptability. Like, we have to, at least for most of us, people who are prone to burnout tend to be type A, high control people. And learning to be more flexible, to go with the flow, to allow ourselves to react to the world with less of the attachment is a really, really key trait. So those would be my top 3. Thanks for the question.
2 new hands. We have Jack and then Beth.
Hi, can you hear me? Excuse me.
Yes.
Okay, so kind of similar to Melanie, where I feel like I have a recurring trigger like my whole life. So it just happened recently. My partner is going away, has a new job, and is going away somewhere fabulous for work in a few weekends. I have this thing where the person that I'm with, I don't know, it's kind of a fear of missing out on the fun, but it's also so much more of that of they're going to have fun without me. And it's my mind takes it down this whole road that ends in us separated. And it makes no sense to me up here, but somehow it just triggers me every time. So my first instinct was, well, I'll just plan my own fabulous vacation that weekend and it'll keep my mind off of it. And so I feel like everything I've tried to plan has gotten blocked. So I feel like almost like it's the universe saying, nope, like you don't get to take that easy way out. Like you need to deal with it. So I'm kind of opening to that idea of, okay, maybe I just need to sit with it like that weekend. And don't get me wrong, like I'm an introvert. I love to be alone unless I don't want to be alone. And it's scary to be alone. So part of me is like, maybe I really just need to take that weekend and sit with it and feel that anxiety and just let it do its thing and let it burn. Like, I don't want to run for it forever because I'm 57 years old and I feel like this has been my whole life. And I'm sort of feeling like, part of what I'm here for right now is to learn this lesson and learn how to deal with this. So I guess my question would be like, I'm a little afraid to just leave myself alone and support. Like, I don't mind my strategy to just be, okay, I'll just sit here and I'll deal with it and I'll let it really hurt, if that makes sense. So I don't know if you have any advice for me on just like how to deal with, how to not run from it, but also kind of protect myself at the same time.
Yeah. So absolutely. Thank you for the question. Having that gentleness with yourself is important. So it's good that you're already tuned in, that it could be scary. It could be a little overwhelming. And there's one key thing that you said, Jack. You said, this has been with me all my life, which to me just signals an invitation to go back and look at your family of origin and how you grew up. Because it sounds like there may have been, this is, armchair diagnosis here, but it sounds like there may have been an attachment wound. And so all of us as babies, we come into this world expecting to receive. Just like when we were in the womb, we got everything. Every need we wanted was met. And so babies just expect that I'm going to get my needs met. Food, water, changing, cuddles, talking, singing, rocking. And then real life happens. Our parents are busy, or they're sick, or they're not well attuned. And for some reason or another, our needs may not have gotten met, or they were met in a very inconsistent way. And it's important because in those first 2-3 years of life, we're creating compassion circuits. We humans model what we see. And so we need a caregiver to be tuned in. I'm teaching a masterclass about this tomorrow. We need our caregivers to be tuned in. They need to look at us. They need to coo and interact with us, because as our brain is developing, we're learning how to self-soothe. We're building an attachment calming response. And if it didn't happen, so I often talk about how parents back in the day used to say, let the baby cry it out. And then what happens is our attachment system gets tweaked such that we're either really, really always longing, and when a parent or caregiver goes away, translate that to adult relationships, we feel like, I almost can't breathe. Like, oh my gosh. So that is, you could consider that almost like a trauma response. When we feel that longing and we start to either reach for them, just like a child would reach for them, or cling. Of course, if you happen to be on the avoidance side, you might push them away, or fine, I'm just going to cut you off. So I would invite you, Jack, to look at your attachment style. If you visit my website, you can find that I have a little mini course, and it's very gentle, but it will help you get down to the root of the injuries. And what I invite you to do is just take it's called a timeline of life events when you get to this mini course. I'm not sure if it's on Innate Vitality, but it's definitely on AndreaPennington.com. It's called The 3 Keys to Become the Hero of Your Life. And I show you how to do a timeline of life events to find out where that original wounding came from. In my case, like with perfectionism, for example, it wasn't just one wounding. It was all my friggin' childhood, my dad, very critical and harsh. But you can identify different moments on your timeline where you got these messages. And if it was in infancy because a parent was sick or alcoholic or emotionally absent or whatever, you can go back and do some reparenting work. Part of that's with journaling, part of that's with guided meditations, and do it very gently. And I offer free support on a monthly basis for people who want to do that process, because it does sometimes bring things up and you need a safe container if you're not already in therapy. So feel free to reach out if that is helpful.
Wow, that's beautiful. And it looks like we have time for about one more question. And I see Beth Clark with her hand up.
Hi, Beth.
Hi. Thank you so much for your work and making everybody's life easier. So you've sort of answered all of this So just decide to answer whatever part of this you want to. What are your favorite ways, or do you feel like your most effective ways of getting people to get back to that inner child, particularly if as adults, I work with a lot of young adults and people with chronic illnesses, they're experiencing all of that through the physical body. Like, how do they get to those? What are your favorite techniques for getting to those original woundings?
So I have shared some of it. I typically start off with the writing ones before I even get people into the guided meditation to contact the inner child. Simply because if you can go through the 4 days of writing about a low point. Now, for those of you who do this exercise, this 3 keys to become the hero, there's positive stuff too. Don't worry, it's not all trauma. But when we do this exercise of unburdening in a journal that you never have to share with anyone, that helps you kind of put things into perspective. Even though you may have already talked about it a bunch, doing this 5-day exercise really, really helps. And then, using that timeline of life events, we identify maybe one time, maybe not the most painful time first, but the one time where, as a child or as a young person, where did that wound show up? So for some of us, we took on protective strategies. Maybe we became a people pleaser, or maybe we became, like in my case, the good girl, like always trying to get good grades and be smart and never mess up. So you can kind of go back into your timeline. Don't pick a really traumatic one, but you pick one and see if you can imagine yourself at that age. Where were you? What were the kinds of things you saw around you? What house were you in? What parks and playgrounds, if you were younger? And then doing some of the guided meditations to just connect. The guided ones are nice because you're listening to someone's voice, my voice in this case. You're listening to me guide you in the imagery, kind of like what we practiced here, to connect with that inner child. For some people, they can't do it mentally, and so I ask them to see if you can find a picture of yourself at a younger age. Many people cannot remember stuff from their childhood, not necessarily because there was trauma, but for various reasons. So I invite you to either look at a photo or at least go to the time that you do remember and just see if you can get back into any scene. And it doesn't have to be traumatic. Again, it could be you riding the school bus or you at an amusement park. But if you combine these modalities of the writing and the guided meditation, I find that most people are able to do it. And then when I work with people in workshops, we literally will have people sit in different chairs. This is me when I was a teenager. And sitting from that chair, it's typical Gestalt work. It's also in my book, the Real Self-Love Handbook. It helps you to physically get into it. Psychodrama is great for that. Or family constellations, where you're working with the other people in a group setting where people can represent you or other people. So there are a lot of different ways. I've covered some of them, but I like the writing to begin with, and then the guided meditation, because you can do it on your own, and then you can work with a therapist or a coach to take it deeper.
Wow. Well, thank you so much. And thank you, everyone, for all of your participation. And I love how open this community is and all your vulnerability with your questions and sharing. And also, I invite you all to come to Omega this year and definitely join Dr. Pennington, July 23rd through 25th at Omega for the first time. And again, thank you all so much. Thank you for your time and coming all the way from France.
Yeah, it's going to be a great session. I really do welcome you all to come and spend the weekend with us. It'll be restorative, and we'll be able to take a deep dive into these 10 traits of resilience.
Thanks again, everyone. Enjoy your day.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for being here.
Bye.
Thank you, Veronica. Thank you, Omega team.